Watching the news can be disheartening, especially when it comes to the planet. So today I've got 7 good news stories about Earth to show you that hope is definitely not lost, and I'll tell you all about them whilst I go for a hike here in the stunning Australian Alps. And so our first bit of good news comes from São Paulo, where this absolute legend planted this entire city park all by himself. So without any authorization from city officials, Helio da Silva set out to reforest this degraded urban river as a way of leaving a legacy and repaying the city that has accepted him. See, Helio grew up in a small country town but moved hundreds of kilometers away to one of the densest cities in the world in São Paulo. And decades later, when he was retired, he came across the degraded riverbanks of the Tiquatira River and decided that out of love for his new home, he would use his own savings to buy trees to reforest the banks. In 2003, Helio planted the first 200 saplings. However, at the time, the area was still a hub for illegal activity, and after a few months, all 200 were ripped out and tossed into the river. But undeterred, Helio went back, took out some more money, this time buying 400 trees. But the same thing happened. A few months later, all 400 trees were ripped out and tossed into the waterway. But showing what kind of guy he is, Helio went back again, but this time planted a whopping 5,000 saplings, jokingly saying that he would plant so many that he would tire the vandals out. Thankfully, those trees remained in the ground, and 5 years later, the city officially adopted the sprouting urban forest as its first linear park and added a playground, sports field, amphitheatre, and outdoor gym equipment. Now more than 20 years on, Tiquatira Linear Park stretches over 3.2 kilometers, and Helio himself has planted over 40,000 trees, nearing his ultimate goal of planting 50,000. Now, if you're new around here, my name is Dom and I create content highlighting good news about our planet over on Instagram, and now I do these good news hikes so I can go into a bit more depth on some of the stories and also, I guess at the same time, showcase some stunning parts of Australia at the moment and hopefully around the world. And today we're here in the stunning Australian high country, and depending on how my lungs hold up, as well as how this weather goes, we'll try to get up to the peak of Mount Gingera, which is the second highest peak here in the region, and hopefully there'll be some snow up there. We'll see how we go, but if not, we'll at least make it up to this old hut, which I'll tell you all about once we get up there. Now, unless you are living under a rock, I'm sure you've heard about how Paris cleaned up the Seine ahead of the Olympics, but what you may not have known is that the waterway was once so polluted it was literally illegal to swim in. So, as a result of human, industrial and agricultural waste, as well as safety concerns posed by the increase in boats, swimming was banned in the city stretch of the Seine in the 1860s and in the surrounding areas in the 1920s. But the river wasn't just off limits for humans, it was also dangerous for wildlife and considered to be biologically dead, with only 3 fish species able to survive in its waters. But so to undo the damage, Paris poured over 1.4 billion euros into restoring the health of the ecosystem by doing things like installing purification systems, building massive rainwater tanks, and connecting 20,000 homes to the sewer, which had been flushing directly into the river. Now, as evidence of the success of the efforts, 3 new public swimming spots have opened, located next to the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame Cathedral, and National Library, marking the first time since 1923 that it is legal to swim in the waterway. And as for how the initiative has benefited wildlife, monitoring by Parisian fishing associations has documented just under 40 different species now living in the river, as well as jellyfish, crustaceans, shrimp and sponges. The success at the Seine also appears to be sparking change internationally, as people in Berlin are calling for the Spree River to be cleaned up for swimming, as it has been illegal to enter for over a century due to the same issues that the Seine had. Now, if you're a horse lover, I have some incredible news for you, which is that the last truly wild horse species has returned to central Kazakhstan. So 6 Przewalski's horses are now roaming free within a 4 million hectare network of protected areas in central Kazakhstan's Golden Steppe, where the species hasn't existed in nearly 200 years. Przewalski's horse was once likely widespread across much of Central Asia, however the species was pushed to the brink and became extinct in the wild in 1969 as a result of hunting, habitat loss and inbreeding. But before the horses vanished forever, conservation organisations from around the world came together to help rebuild the population from the last 13 individuals. Fast forward to today, and the programs have been such a success that the total captive population has surpassed 2,000 individuals, allowing them to begin reintroducing the species to the wild, first in Mongolia and China, and now Kazakhstan. Last year, with the help of the Czech army, 6 horses from Munich and Prague zoos were flown in and entered an acclimation enclosure where they spent a year learning how to survive in the extreme seasonal conditions. And after demonstrating that they hadn't lost any of their natural instincts, all 6 have now been released into a 40,000 square kilometre network of protected areas and ecological corridors, and there are already plans to release another 40 over the next 4 years. This next story is a bit of a curveball, as it's about how recycling your plastic bottles could win you 100,000 euros depending on where you are. So depending on where you live, you might be familiar with the bottle and can recycling schemes where you get a few cents for each one that you drop off at recycling sites. However, Norway's system includes a lottery. See, in Norway, when you return a bottle or can, you can choose between a guaranteed smaller payout, or you could figuratively roll the dice for a chance to win 5, 10, 100 or even 100,000 euros. And as the country has one of the highest rates of plastic bottle recycling in the world, a group of researchers from Alberta, Canada wanted to investigate if the introduction of a lottery component could be used to boost these already effective programs in other countries. So they conducted a 2-month trial offering people either a guaranteed return of 10 cents or a 0.1% chance at $1,000, and they found that people intending to choose the lottery option bought 47% more items. And based on that finding, it's projected that if similar schemes were rolled out across every state in America, it could in theory see an additional 2.1 million items returned compared to schemes without a lottery component. And the researchers did make the point that if these lotteries are rolled out more broadly, it is crucial that the smaller payouts remain as an option, as nowadays more and more people are reliant on money from schemes like this to help supplement their income. If you rent or live in an apartment, this next story should be especially exciting for you, as balcony solar arrays could soon be legalised in another country. So, building on the success of solar balconies in Germany, the UK government has announced its plans to begin exploring the possibility of legalising the technology, which would finally allow renters and apartment dwellers to generate their own green energy. For some background, almost 1 million people across Germany have installed solar arrays on their balconies, and despite them each only having a handful of panels, their impact is quickly adding up. See, it's reported that in the first half of last year alone, over 200 megawatts of balcony solar was installed, which is mind-blowing. However, it's worth noting that the real figure is likely much higher. And because Germany limits the systems to just 800 watts, they can be plugged directly into a power socket, making them super easy to remove and reinstall at the end of your lease. And so recently, the UK government published this press release, which included its first official mention of balcony solar arrays. The safety review will likely explore the fire risk of the arrays, as well as identify a safe maximum capacity and determine if the systems can be plugged directly into the power point or if additional batteries and inverters are required. One of the driving factors behind the substantial uptake in Germany is the amount of people living in apartments and flats, which suggests we could see similar results in the UK, as in England and Wales over 20% of people live in apartments or flats and 20% of families are renting. Now, if I ask you what the biggest protected area is on the planet, something like America's Wrangell St. Elias National Park or even the Great Barrier Reef might come to mind. However, the real answer could soon be something a whole lot bigger. So this group of islands in the Western Pacific is the French territory of French Polynesia, and at the recent UN Ocean Conference, its president Motai Brotherson announced the territory's plans to protect its entire exclusive economic zone. The waters of French Polynesia are among the most biodiverse in the world, with over 1,000 fish, whales, dolphins and sea turtle species, as well as coral reefs, which are some of the healthiest on the planet. The president said that the people of the island had been using the ocean sustainably for generations, but now they wanted to step up its management to align with the standards of the IUCN. See, through their traditional rahui practices, the people would routinely restrict fishing in areas to allow marine life to rebound, similar to how people on land move their animals around the landscape. But so now the territory is looking to permanently protect its 5 million square kilometre exclusive economic zone, 1.1 million of which will be highly or fully protected and only allow low impact tourism, traditional fishing and scientific research. In the remaining areas, more activities will be able to occur, however things like deep sea mining and bottom trawling will still be completely off limits, which is an incredible win if everything goes ahead as planned. I cannot get over just how much snow is here. It is, mate, it's blowing my mind. At the start, I swear I said, I was having doubts if there'd be any snow at all. And I'm still not at the peak. The peak's way up over there, but just look how thick it is. And especially compared to my last video, if you saw it, yeah, it was nothing like this. This is incredible. now I'm almost up at the hut, pretty thankfully because it has started to snow, but that means I better get into this last bit of good news, which is that Indigenous communities have regained self-governing control over 18 million hectares of the Colombian Amazon. So in what is the largest agreement of its kind, Colombia is going beyond handing back land titles and is beginning to recognise Indigenous communities as local governments with self-governing authority. This incredible breakthrough has not come overnight, as despite Colombia already recognising Indigenous territorial entities at constitutional level, it's taken 34 years for this legal framework to be formalised and agreed to. And so through the new legal framework, Colombia will recognise the communities as official local authorities, complete with territorial control similar to that of municipalities and governorships. And that means these communities will have full control over public budgets, allowing them to fund works and programs that are needed most in their communities, rather than having to campaign for government attention and funding. Already 22 Indigenous groups have entered the process, and when finalised, Indigenous governments will have oversight of over 18 million hectares of the rainforest, representing a whopping 40% of Colombia's Amazon. I'm not sure how well this is picking up on camera, but this is incredible. This is the first time in my life I've ever seen snow like this, and it is stunning. So let's have a look how the older Parks and Gardens officers were living. And so this is all left behind in case anyone's stuck out here in a blizzard, or not a blizzard, in a snowstorm. They've got some dry firewood for them. Now I'm not gonna lie, this is extremely creepy. So I'm not keen to spend too long in here, but just to show you what some of these were like. And there's not much of it, and look, the roof is starting to fall in, but geez, for a shelter in the middle of a storm, you can't ask for much more. And they've even left matches and nice little guest book. I think that is the perfect spot to end this good news hike. If you did enjoy, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss your next dose of good news. And in case you missed it, click here to watch the last hike that I did down in the stunning Kosciuszko National Park.